Just Energy Radio with your host, naturopath and medical intuitive, Dr. Rita Louise. We have learned from Einstein's theory that matter and energy are one. Physicists believe that all systems in nature have their own particular way of vibrating. From the swinging of a pendulum to the waves of the ocean to the light that brightens the sky each day, each of these oscillates at its own unique rate. The same holds true for every thought, feeling, event, or word we speak. Each has its own frequency or rate of vibration. What many of us don't realize is when we take everything in our universe down to its simplest form, it is all just energy. Join Dr. Rita Louise on a journey through time and space where past, present, and future collide. Today, what you believe may be called into question. What we want to know is, who made up the rules? Be brave and step outside the box. We are about to turn our world upside down and venture into the unknown. Hold on. We are departing our own beliefs and entering alternative realms. Enjoy the possibilities.
Hello and welcome to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show tonight. Oh my God, I just can't even believe how I did this. But in the first hour, we're going to be speaking to Dr. Bernie Siegel about his book, A Book of Miracles. And in the second hour, we're going to be having Neale Donald Walsch on the show. Imagine that, two great people all in one show. Oh, I just feel so lucky. Just Energy Radio is brought to you by soulhealer.com, which is about the products and services I offer, including medical intuition evaluations, energy healing, and psychic readings. So if there's stuff going on in your life, give me a call, drop me an email, and we can set up a time for a private consultation by phone, in person, and even by Skype. So we can help you get your life back together and help you re-experience health, healing, and wholeness. It's also brought to you by the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com, where you can jumpstart your intuition today by downloading their free 50-page guide. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. Before we get started on the show, I just want to do a quick shout out to George C. for his very generous donation to the show. And so if you're out there and would like to help support Just Energy Radio, there is a button on the webpage and in the email, and we would always love your ongoing support to keep this programming alive. Just trying to think if there's any other announcements, not that I can really think of. In this hour, we're going to be speaking with Dr. Bernie Siegel. Let me tell you a little bit about him and get him on the air. As a physician who has cared for and counseled innumerable people whose mortality has been threatened by illness, Dr. Bernie Siegel embraces a philosophy of living and dying that stands out in the forefront of the medical ethics and spiritual issues our society grapples with today. He continues to assist in the breaking of new ground in the field of healing and personally struggling to live the message of kindness and love. The author of the book, A Book of Miracles, his website is BernieSiegelMD.com. Please welcome to Just Energy Radio, Dr. Bernie Siegel. Hey, Bernie, how are you?
All right. Every time your show begins, my mind starts flying. I got to mention, number one, that I find naturopaths to be an enormous help in caring for cancer patients. Number two, the word possibilities that came up. You know, when you talk about miracles, our lives don't depend on statistics. Things are possible. And I've learned from success. When people don't die when they're supposed to, I say, how come you didn't die? And they always have a story. You know, as one woman said, when you live in your heart, magic happens. And then Ernest Holmes, Science of Mind, I love this sentence he wrote in one of his books, and I know he was smiling when he wrote it. What if Jesus was the only normal person who ever lived? So think about our potential. That's a word I always use with people. And if you're not afraid of failing, hey, you try. You see if you can achieve your potential.
But that's really good. Bernie, I wanted to ask you, what got you inspired to write your Book of Miracles in the first place?
It's, you know, to open people's minds, because they're all stories. As I say, you know, that these are not just about physical problems, but they're interesting things that happen to people. You're walking in a national park in a fog. You hear a voice that means something to you. So you stop and turn around. And the next day there's no fog, and you realize you would be dead today if you hadn't turned and responded to the voice, because there was a cliff, and a couple more steps she would have been off the cliff. You have a dream. A woman appears and says, there's a lump in your right breast. She has dark skin. She has an accent. You go to the hospital. They diagnose it as cancer. Who walks in to take care of you? A woman physician from India who was the woman in your dream. Now, yeah, and about 90 years ago, Carl Jung interpreted a dream and diagnosed a brain tumor. Nobody tells that to medical students. We should be saying to people, what are you dreaming? What do you know about your body? And that's why I got into whether you call them miracles or just consciousness, and the drawings by patients. That patients draw their anatomy. They draw the future. One child in the waiting room drew a picture of the operating room. It's symbolic, but everybody who looked at it knew that she was drawing an operating room she'd never been in. Meaning there were 2 yellow objects and there are 2 lights in there with black knobs on them. And she drew 4 black knobs and other, the number of people, the colors of the drapes that you cover patients with. I mean, it's just unbelievable. But that's what converted people in the hospital. So I went from being crazy to interesting. Then they made a drawing book. The operating room created a drawing book for kids to color in before surgery. And some of the kids, now, on one page it said, you will meet an anesthesiologist who's wearing an outfit that looks like green pajamas. Hey, it tells you. And what does a child draw? A red anesthesiologist. And the anesthesiologist said to me, yes, there's danger. His mother has muscular dystrophy. He may have a genetic defect and be severely damaged by muscle relaxants because he'll go into contractions, not relaxation, raise body temperature, damage his brain. I said, hey, look at the last page. If he draws himself purple, a spiritual color, I'm sending him home because he may be saying, I'm going to die in the operating room. Well, the last page was red and black. It hurts where you operate and I'm not happy being here. So we went ahead. But again, how does a child intuitively know that? And believe me, it's not an accident. I've had enough experience. But again, the crazy medical profession. I sent articles to medical journals. Yes, this is interesting, but it's not appropriate. I sent them to psychology and psychiatry journals. Yes, it's appropriate, but it's not interesting. We know this. That's the part that drives me nuts. Doctors treat the result, not the cause. It's like having electricians and plumbers. They can't do the other one's work. And as doctors, we become so specialized, we don't take care of the person. We take care of the diagnosis. And I learned to take care of people. And when you took care of people, they didn't die when they were supposed to, See, Solzhenitsyn in his book, Cancer Ward, uses a wonderful term. If somebody gets well and they're not supposed to, doctors will say, oh, you had a spontaneous remission or a miracle. See? Well, what the hell do you learn from it? Nothing. You're lucky. But Solzhenitsyn talks about self-induced healing fluttering out of the book like a rainbow-colored butterfly. When I read that, he knows the story. The rainbow is your life in order. The butterfly is a symbol of transformation. You want good things to happen? Transform your life. Create harmony and order. And your body changes its chemistry. I always say, if I had to summarize everything I'm trying to teach people, is love your life and love your body.
But you said something really important, is that when we change our mood and change our expression, it changes the chemistry inside of us, which changes everything. Yeah,
it's all physical. It's not, just what you're imagining. I have a crazy mantra every morning that I put together from Lao Tzu, Zen therapists, psychologists, and others. It's about 8 or 9 or 10 lines. I don't know if you want to hear it.
Sure, why not?
Yeah, because my wife has multiple sclerosis. When I'm getting her to exercise, I say it, and it perks her up. Thank you for everything. I have no complaint whatsoever. I am happy. I am healthy. I love my life, my family, my body, and my pets. I am content with what I have. I have all the energy I require. I rejoice in the way things are. Nothing is lacking. The whole world belongs to me. And you feel better after you say that.
What I really like about that is you're not asking for anything. You're not begging for anything. It's more like you're accepting and coming to terms with what's
and
going
changing
on.
My attitude. And the reason I do it is I know I feel better when I say it, no matter what's going on that morning. But I also know from studies by psychologists who were doing these things that 3 to 6 months later, people said, hey, it works. Because in the beginning, I had to laugh at some of the stories I was reading. What good is that going to do? I have no complaint whatsoever. I got plenty of trouble. But, when the therapist kept saying, just keep repeating it. 3 months later, they'd come in saying, I do feel better. But you have to be willing to give it a try. So I experiment with myself. Then I know it's not my imagination. That it's really working. It's not because I believe in it or have faith in it. That works too, and I do that with people. If they believe in me, I help them with the beliefs. But I know it works because I'm testing it on myself. And my wife too, because I see it makes a difference for her.
With you doing that work with her, have you noticed changes in her physical ability? Or less
we're doing like a couple of flights of stairs that are in the house on the way to the kitchen to have breakfast. So that's like our first exercise in the morning. And I can see that her steps, are more rhythmic and energized going up and down than if I don't say it. And sometimes if I forget, she'll start saying it and it clicks, It's like a rhythm. If each step is, thank you for everything. I have no complaint whatsoever. I am happy. I am healthy. You get into a rhythm and it improves everything. And she puts up with me.
Well, and that's, probably a good thing right there.
Yeah. Yeah, because she has a good sense of humor too. And, she teaches me. She's my therapist. I'm her therapist. So we help each other.
It just seems that people don't realize or understand that they can learn so much from the things they say, from the situations that happen around them, from the situations they find themselves in, from the people that they interact with, don't you think?
Yeah. And it's crazy that in medicine, they don't study success. I can't tell you how many people, a lawyer, he was told he had a 5% chance of living 2 years. When his car is being fixed, he went in a used bookstore, found my book, Love, Medicine, and Miracles, read it, transformed his life, his cancer disappeared. Now, if I were his doctor, I'd say, what the hell did you do? Let me tell other patients. His doctor said, no, I'm not interested. You're lucky. I'm glad it happened. That's ridiculous. We need to learn from success. What is it that you did that I could say to another patient to have it happen? And that's something I learned. Because I'd be out lecturing and see people in the audience I thought were dead. And because I worked with 3 other surgeons, so we had a lot of patients, and sometimes, hey, they're not coming back to the office. Oh, they must have died. And then, who's out there? The patient. I have one story, if I have a moment to tell you. This was a landscaper. See, there's a poem by W.H. Auden about cancer. Childless women get it, and men when they retire. It's as if there had to be an outlet for their foiled creative fire. Now, a doctor said, just because it rhymes doesn't make it true. But it is true. Loneliness affects the genes that control immune function. So a landscaper retires, develops an ulcer, and to make a long story short, when it didn't heal, biopsy shows cancer. I operate on him. But when I said to him, I need to get you right in the hospital, he said, no, I want to go home and make the world beautiful. So if I die, I'll leave a beautiful world. A couple of weeks later, he came back, we operate. I said, John, I can't cure you. You need more treatment. No, you forgot something. What did I forget? It's springtime. Got to go make the world beautiful. So when I die, I'll leave a beautiful world. He never came back to the office until 6 years later. I said to the nurse, when she handed me his chart, I said, he's dead. We must have two people with the same name. So get the other chart. And she said, Bernie, open the door. I opened the door and John said, I have a hernia from lifting boulders in my landscape business. John lived to 94. I gave a talk at his 70th wedding anniversary to tell people what an incredible guy he was and that he'd become my teacher about how beautiful life and the world was. And when his wife died, he just sort of turned the switch off too, to go with her. But that's the kind of thing, you see, you hear a story. That he's not lucky. He's not having a spontaneous remission. He is changing his life, and his body heals itself. That chemistry, that message, that energy, it's all scientific. And so I'd say, yeah, we need to learn from John, and we all need to go home and do that. Even pets. A study of people who had a heart attack. If you had a dog in the house, a year later, 6% of the people had died. No dog in the house, 24% of the people had died. And to discuss love for a minute, Harvard students were asked, did your parents love you? They said no. 98% had suffered a major illness by middle age. Of those who said, yes, I was loved, about 25% had suffered a major illness. That's why you want to change the world, love the children.
That's amazing.
I keep thinking of people in the office. Suicidal teenager said to me one day, you're my CD. I said, what are you talking about? I'm a CD.
Yeah, what are you talking about?
He said, you're my chosen dad. That's a CD, a chosen dad. And that's what I learned, that I became people's parent, and I loved them. Not just treated their disease, but I loved them. And it's very different than liking, if you know what I mean. I may not like how they behaved, but I let them know I love you. Then, with time, they realized they were worth something and began to love themselves and take care of themselves. So I'd say to everybody, become a CM or a CD. Just tell people, you need a father, you need a mother, I'll be that person. And it affects them profoundly.
But the part that I find the most interesting is that you are a doctor, and I think most people's experience with their doctors has nothing to do with who you are, your personality, and how it sounds like you treat your patients.
Yeah, I'm not a normal doctor. And
you moved to Texas so you could be my doctor.
State.
I mean, not that I ever go to the doctor.
Jung also said that those who seek to be normal, it's because they feel inadequate to begin with. So I've never worried about being normal. I've just been myself. See, I shaved my head back in the 1970s. I had to. That's the only thing I can tell you. I had this incredible urge. I have to shave my head. Our family, our kids were so embarrassed, by their father. Their hair's down to their shoulders, and I'm shaving my head and looking bizarre. I was enough of a problem already. And later on in my life, and I think if I'd been in therapy, I might have known this, I came across, again, reading Jung. He said, this story, the hero's head is shaved. It is called a tonsure, Tonsure, what monks do to uncover their spirituality and be like a newborn again. When I read that, I knew that was me. And I thought, wow, if I'd only seen a therapist, maybe they would have explained that to me, why I had this incredible urge. But it just didn't seem to make any sense. But I knew it was about uncovering, because I have a self-portrait. I was a painter. Part of why I became a surgeon, I felt, was to use my hands. I was an artist. And I paint myself in a cap, mask, and gown, the way you're dressed in the operating room. You don't know it's a portrait of me. And why would you paint yourself that way? I mean, today I couldn't conceive of that's your self-portrait. Because when the family got tired of posing and our pets got tired of sitting still, I said, I'll paint myself in a mirror. And I covered myself up. And it all fit together. What you needed to uncover was what was within you. And that's true of everybody out there. You keep it stored in you, it'll cause you trouble. And if you're smart, yeah, you'll let the trouble wake you up and start you living again. But I always say, don't wait for a disaster to then write a book to help everybody. The books have been written. Read them and change your life.
Hear, hear.
Way back, a lot of decades ago, and I didn't know this is not normal. I thought, hey, this is what happens to everybody when you die. And I thought, this is really neat. I prefer being dead. I'm sorry my parents will find me dead, but I like being dead. People didn't come in to save me. The kid on the bed had a seizure and vomited. And the piece came loose and he took a breath and it was like a vacuum cleaner. You know, boom, I was back in there. And again, it gave me a different concept of creation, even though I was just 4 years old. It's like, hey, it's not up to you, kid. You know, you don't make all the decisions. There's something more to this. And then many years later, I was very busy with interviews and doing all kinds of things and writing books. And a friend of mine over the phone said, why are you living this life? Because I was so busy. I said to her, oh my God. She said, what do you mean? I said, I've gone into a trance because of what you just said. And to summarize it all, I saw myself with the sword in my hand killing people and animals and their pets. And I said, wow, maybe that's why I'm a surgeon, to help people with a knife. And even our home, I always called it a zoo with our 5 kids who were like crew members. I mean, we had fenced in, and I'm talking about 1.5 acres, you know, and we're not living on a farm. We broke all the zoning laws. We had animals fenced in the front yard, goats and ducks and geese. The house was filled with all kinds of things, and veterinarians gave us all kinds of exotic pets, roaming the house. Everybody was family. I mean, I know it sounds crazy. As a matter of fact, some of it was humorous because we'd hatch all the eggs in an incubator, and they would imprint on the children and think that's our parents. So when the school bus would pull up, guess who would go to get on the bus? All the ducks and geese would follow the kids to the school bus and try to get on the bus. And it was a joke in our neighborhood. But when I released some of them on my mother's house near a lake, she called me. I thought it was fascinating. You see, animals have feelings and memories too. She called me up and said, Bernie, what is it, Mom? Our neighbors want to know something. What? Every time a school bus pulls up, all the ducks and geese come out of the lake and up to the road. I laughed. I said, they're looking for our children. But, you know, it shows we're all involved in thinking, feeling, relationships. I mean, it's a mystical world. And we need to be here to enjoy it, too, and to accept what's here and be at peace.
But there are so many people that don't.
I know. And I keep trying to help them. That's why, as a surgeon, a patient said to me, I need to know how to live between office visits. And medicine is just beginning. Well, this sentence tells it all. Say, whether it's your work or mine, we're trained to treat the result, not the cause. So emotionally, this is an ad in a medical journal. I'm depressed, unable to cope. I went to see my physician. He prescribed an antidepressant. I feel better now. I wrote to the drug company in the journal. I said, excuse me, don't you think the doctor ought to say what's going on in your life before he hands a person a pill? And they canceled the ad. But you see, if you're trained to say, what's your complaint? Okay, here's your diagnosis. Go home and do this. But I would say to people, what are you experiencing? And what was fascinating is the words they used were about their life. And some of those were a book I wrote right after a book of miracles, The Art of Healing. There's 60 drawings in it and discusses dreams too. But you say to a woman, what are you experiencing? Oh, failure. How does that fit your life? Well, my body failed me. I'm asking you, how does failure fit your life? Oh, my parents committed suicide when I was a child. That must have been a failure as a child. That helped heal her life, that question. Your migraine headache that you're being admitted to the hospital for. What does it feel like? Pressure. What's the pressure in your life? My marriage. I talked to her for a while, and she got up and went home instead of to the hospital, free of pain, to straighten out her marriage. And I always say this to people. I don't care what your problem is. Stop and say to yourself, how would I describe this to someone else? And then if you come up with negative words, say, what else in my life fits those words? And then eliminate them. It'll help you heal. Now, there are people, fortunately, who say it's been a wake-up call, a blessing, a new beginning. I call life a labor pain. But when, whether it's Joseph Campbell or a lot of other philosophers, when you say, as Campbell said, on my journey through hell, if I stop and say, what am I to learn from this experience? Yeah. You see, and a friend of mine said it, and I thought it was very neat. She helped me because I'm complaining one day. Bernie, you get upset when you're hungry? No. What do? I get something to eat. Okay. Then ask yourself what nourishment you need. And I think that's like Campbell is saying in a different way, that when you don't like how you feel and what's going on in your life, say, what nourishment do I need so I can correct this problem in my life and change my life? And again, it's like letting your heart make up your mind, not what do I think I should do? No, what feels right. To quote a lawyer, because I always say being a lawyer is a serious illness, because they're trained to think. And engineers have problems too, because I asked one engineer to draw a picture and he wrote a page full of instructions. And everybody laughed when they saw what he handed me. But that woke him up. He was asked to draw a picture and he wrote instructions. But the lawyer sent me this, an article he had written, because a tragedy occurred. And he was busy thinking, about what I should do. And this was a sentence that he sent. I came to a conclusion that was eminently reasonable, totally logical, and completely wrong, because while learning to think, I almost forgot how to feel. Yeah. So pay attention to your feelings. And don't make your body wake you up with a life-threatening illness. See, Monday morning, we have more heart attacks, strokes, suicides, and illnesses. And there's a survivor personality. You mentioned my website. There's something there called immune competent personality. I was happy to see in USA Today an article by a doctor. See, that they're waking up. Because what she said was, if we're doing a study on a new drug, we need to know the people we're giving it to. Because she said that, when you look at exercise, nutrition, there are people who survive not because it's a wonderful drug, but because of their lifestyle and their attitude. And so you have, let's say, 100 depressed people who don't want to live, and you give them a pill to cure a disease, and you get lousy results. It ain't the pill, it's the people. And I found that too. The mind is so powerful. You talk about energy. When people, due to medical errors, you don't receive the treatment you thought you're getting. And I'm talking about surgery, chemotherapy, radiation. The doctors don't know that they're not treating their patients. Okay, these are true stories. I don't make these up. And what happened is when the doctors did routine, inspections and checking, they realized, we haven't been treating. But the patients had beneficial effects, literally shrinking cancer, and side effects because they thought they were getting treatment. And that's why the doctors didn't know they weren't treating them. Because I was trying to help the doctors who were so upset and depressed over, I haven't treated anybody. I said, it's not your fault. They acted as if they were being treated, so you didn't know. And you should have seen their eyes bulge, because it never occurred to them that that's why they never stopped to think they weren't treating someone, because they were all acting as if they were. And it's hypnotic.
But can it happen in the inverse, where the doctor will say something and it will make your body not work? Like I have a client who, we won't talk about his issue, but he was taking some herbal remedies that are very effective, relatively safe, and he was told by the physician, those things don't work. Why are you bother taking them? And it's kind of like, really?
Yeah, that's a stupid doctor. And I mean that. You see, because we're giving information, not an education. That doctor's treating the disease, not the patient. I have an article on my website called Deceiving People into Health. Now, why? Would you be upset if I lied to you and you got better? I don't think so. And I did a lot of children's surgery, and I realized how powerful my words were. And then one of our kids brought this home, and I don't think this was an accident. Write the word words, 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 words on a piece of paper with no space between the words. You know what they become?
A lot of words?
Swords, 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 swords. So we can kill or cure with words. See, I know people who died in a week. Why? You have lung cancer. Yes, you have cataracts, but we're not paying for cataract surgery because you only have a year or two to live. He went home and died in a week. That was his health plan. Okay? So, yes, I hear those things too that kill people. But giving people hope, and I got criticized for giving false hope. There's no false hope. If you have hope, I mean, what would you be upset about if it helps you live longer? So one of the things that started me doing that was, as I say, lying to children. Because I realized my words meant so much to them. They took it literally. You'll go to sleep when you go in the operating room. You'd say this to a child in the emergency room with appendicitis. Going up to the operating room, you go to sleep when you go in the room. I'm thinking of anesthesia, so he won't be frightened. The kids used to fall asleep on the stretcher we wheeled them in on. It got to be a joke in the operating room because you'd wheel this child down the hall into the room, they'd flip over and fall asleep. And I laugh every time I think of it because a lot of the kids would yell at me, I sleep on my stomach and you're turning me over. And I would say, that's the only way I can get to your appendix. Then they would say, oh, all right. But they took it so literally, they flipped over and went to sleep. And the other was just showing the benefits of hypnosis and the authority figure's words. Take an alcohol sponge, because I tell this to doctors, nurses, take an alcohol sponge and say to the patient, this is going to numb your skin. It's a new type of sponge. You won't feel the needle. I guarantee you at least 1/3 of the people will say, hey, that's great, thank you. And the others will say, you know, I felt it. Oh, bad sponge. But again, it's not the same needle, you know, once they have that belief. So I would always say to parents, I want you to lie to your children for their benefit. Take some vitamins, put a new label on the bottle. Hair growing pill, anti-nausea, pain, whatever problem the kid was having. And they had a complaint, here, take this, you'll feel better. And believe me, it works. I know this from family stories, you know, where family members have given their sick relative the wrong medication or a vitamin pill, and the person got perfectly well. You know, there's, well, one of the most wonderful, it's not in the miracle book, but is sort of, you're having chemotherapy, you're nauseated on the way home, vomiting in the car, so your husband is nice enough to bring a big bag that you can throw up in. One day she came into our support group with a big smile. I said, what happened? I had my chemo. I got in the car. I'm feeling nauseated. My husband handed me the bag. I opened it. There were a dozen roses from him in it. I never vomited again. And there
How wonderful.
Yeah. You know, you see the power of that love and the image and what it does for the person. So, you know, I say, don't be afraid to give hope, love, laughter. You can't be afraid when you're laughing. I mean, there's only one thing to be afraid of. I learned that from a 90-plus-year-old with cancer. When everybody was in a panic, I said to her one day, what are you afraid of? And she sat there for about 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and we're all waiting. And then she said, oh, I know what it is. I said, really? What is it? Driving on the parkway at night. And the whole room bursts out laughing. You say, why? Because we're all sitting there worried about what's going to happen, and her only problem is driving on the parkway at night. And how humor works. We're sitting in a support group again, and I always bring our dogs and pets, and, you know, it makes everybody feel better. So somebody got there late and didn't know I had, you know, brought dogs. It was his first meeting. And he's telling his tragic story, and he hears, and he starts screaming at the group. You don't care? You're totally insensitive? You're falling asleep while I'm telling you about what's happening in my life? And everybody in the room, you know, was sort of motioning at him, calm down. And they point at my chair. under the chair is one of my dogs who fell asleep and was snoring. Well, that guy just burst out laughing. That was the best therapy he's ever had, because it went from this horrible, terrible life to, what a jerk I am. And he's laughing. And it just totally transformed him and taught him, the benefit of laughter. So, and if people do that, laugh for no reason, study done to cancer patients, the group who laughed for no reason several times a day lived longer than the control group, which laughed if something funny happened, but did not laugh, for no reason. And anybody wants to try it, just do it. You'll see how much better you feel if you laugh.
Does that mean I'm going to live forever?
It's possible.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it gets expensive with plastic surgery and all that. But, hey.
I have good skin.
Yeah. But my wife started to do one-liners, like I always say, a female Henny Youngman, to get people to really see the benefits of laughter. So I would talk for about an hour. She'd come up and do humor. And then I'd say to people, how do you feel now? Say 10, 15 minutes later, after you've laughed. And everybody knew. They're sitting up, feeling younger, better. And literally, she would get more thank yous at the end of the workshop than I did. Because of how she helped people feel better, versus my informing them and giving them things to do and how to help yourself. But the laughter makes such a difference.
I love
He who
laughter.
laughs lasts. I don't know if you heard that line. He who laughs lasts. That was like one of her closing lines.
Well, that's pretty good.
Yeah, it's living. Woody Allen said it very well, too. Because one guy's very depressed, and after he rambles on about the hopelessness of, the universe, his friend says, "What are you doing Saturday night?" And he says, "I'm committing suicide." And his friend says, "How about Friday night?" And I think that's what life is about. Enjoy the day. And then we'll see what happens tomorrow. But when you're worrying about tomorrow, you're creating a problem. And again, the kids and the animals aren't thinking about tomorrow. They're trying to have a nice day. That's a sentence. One of our kids, who I thought, he had a tumor, and it looked malignant on x-ray. And so after I looked at the x-ray, I thought, hey, he'll lose a leg and he'll be dead in a year. He came to me the next day after I informed the family, and he said, "Dad, can I talk to you for a minute?" "Yeah, what is it, Keith?" "You're handling this poorly." That's a 7-year-old, his father. He said, "We're trying to have a nice day, and you want us in our room depressed. We'd like to go out in the front yard." And he was my therapist for a week, because when he had the surgery, it turned out to be a very rare benign tumor. It's extremely painful. But he taught me a hell of a lot that week. So I always remember hearing those words. You're handling this poorly.
Out of the mouth of babes, as they say.
The kids were always my teachers. I did, as I said, a lot of pediatric surgery. And, the kids who had love, they managed to get through it all. The unloved, and that's the biggest health problem of our planet. If you grow up without love, you become self-destructive. Well, even the violence is a response to the rejection. Then you go out to seek revenge and you kill a lot of people, and then you kill yourself or let the police kill you. But if you grow up with love, you have a reverence for life. Can I ask you a test question?
Sure.
Tomorrow you're going to walk outside, and there's been a rain in the evening. And as you walk...
Well, all right, so I'm already going to answer the question. I won't go outside because it'll be too cold.
No. I mean, it's not. The temperature's all right. It rains.
Okay.
You go out after the rainfall, and as you're walking down the street, you see quite a few worms on the pavement because they've been washed away, off the ground by the rain. What do you do when you see the worms?
Make a really ugly face at them. And then walk around them?
What I've been doing for decades is picking them up and putting them back on the earth.
How did I know you were going to say that?
Yeah. And I really thought I was neurotic, but I couldn't help it. And then I came across Dear Albert Schweitzer, one of his books. And he said, if you come out after the rain and you see a worm on the pavement, pick it up and place it back on the earth. And if you see an insect in a puddle, give it a leaf to climb up on. And he always talked about a reverence for life. And that's what I saw in our children. I wasn't thinking about it with all the animals. It's just I had to rescue everybody. But they can't hurt anything. They grew up with all these creatures. And one is in law enforcement. I mean, he's capable of killing. But he spent a half an hour saving a turtle's life. He said, I saw this turtle on the ground. Must have been a male because it didn't ask for directions. He has a sense of humor, too. So he picked the turtle up and spent half an hour to find a pond to release it. Now, I don't worry about him hurting somebody. You know? I mean, yes, he might kill somebody to save a life. But I don't have to worry about him being a law enforcement person for the wrong reasons. You know, for not knowing how to deal with his aggression. See, I never stopped talking because it's all part of my learning that Carl Menninger, the psychiatrist, also became a friend and therapist for me years ago. And he said to me, Bernie, what if you became a surgeon as a reaction formation to your destructive tendencies? And I love saying that to people. Why'd you become a surgeon? Well, I like cutting people up, but I don't want to go to jail, so, hey, I get paid for it now. But, you know, he said, Bernie, aggression is normal, but it's how you use it. So I always think, you know, football players are knocking each other's heads off. And recently you read about how they're treating their family. But if you get the aggression out on the field, you don't take it out on your family, say, or your neighbors, or the people even who rejected you, because you've gotten it out. And I took care of some football teams as a doctor, and I was amazed at how quiet these guys were, you know, off the field. 6'3", 250 pounds. Yeah, I don't want them to ever be angry at me, but it impressed me that when they were out on the field knocking heads, when they came off, yeah, they were calm inside because the aggression had been released. So we all need to know ourselves better and what's within us.
Well, and I always find it interesting that when asked, most people know what they need to do or they know the source of their disquiet. But when you say, okay, so why don't you do that? Why don't you quit your job or end this relationship or talk to your spouse or whatever that thing is, they are so reticent.
I think it has a lot to do with failure feelings, because I saw this years ago when I send 100 letters out to people with cancer saying, let me help you live a longer, better life. Come to a meeting. And I thought several hundred people would show up because the secretary forgot to say it's just for our patients. You can't bring friends and relatives. Less than a dozen women showed up. I couldn't believe it. That everybody didn't want to live a longer, better life. But I realized they were afraid of failing. That's how they grew up. I mean, this is a quote. My mother's words were eating away at me and maybe gave me cancer. She said I was a failure. I embarrassed her. She only dressed me in dark clothes so nobody would notice me. Now, what saved that woman's life? Cancer. That's when she said, gave me permission to be my authentic self and to buy a red dress and red high heels shoes. Yeah, it's sad that you need to get a life-threatening illness to start living. And I say that to people, you know, that abandon the past. Put your pictures up around your house where you work and love that kid that you are. I mean, I know people who don't even have pictures of themselves as children because of how their parents. I mean, you know, one woman, the reason I sigh when I think of all these people, you know, I mentioned the woman who said her cancer is a failure. Her parents committed suicide. She's not the only one I know whose parents committed suicide and told their children to kill themselves. So How do you grow up and take care of yourself when that's your life story? You know? Versus having a grandmother like I had, who loved me, no matter what. And I don't have pictures of myself as an infant because my parents didn't want a record of what I looked like. I mean, there were pictures of a covered carriage. You see, again, as a kid, I thought I must have been sleeping because they never told me this story till I grew up. But again, my memories were still of being loved, no matter what I looked like. My parents didn't want to upset neighbors and relatives, so they covered me and hid me, but they still loved me. And what a difference that makes in terms of caring for yourself. You go into an assisted living facility and say to the residents, how many of you were loved by your parents? They look at you like you're nuts. What do you mean? Of course we were loved. So 90% of the hands go up. And I say, that's why you're alive today, because they loved you and you've taken care of yourself. Go into a high school. Say, 70% of high school students have contemplated suicide in one study. Ask high school students, write a suicide note why you should commit suicide and write a love note why you're worth loving for homework. I tell them, you don't have to sign it. I don't need a name on the paper. The suicide pile is 3 to 5 times higher than the love pile. And most of the time, the love pile is never more than 1 page. And the suicide is several pages. And I'm telling you, you go into any high school and ask that question, which pile will be higher, you'll get the right answer.
Do you think that's
let me
endemic?
Say this. Let me add this, that a lot of teachers thought the suicide rate will go up. You're making the kids. No, the suicide rate went down because the kids then began to get into therapy. You see, once they knew, I'm not the only one who has parents who abuse you. I don't have to lie about it anymore. I don't have to say I fell off my bike when my father has punched me in the eye. And so then the therapy starts and they help each other. You know,
do you think it's endemic with contemporary culture, or do you think that this has just been something that has been ongoing in society and it's just now coming to the surface?
I think it's always been a part of society, but I think emotionally it's worse now, that we're becoming more and more detached. See, even back in the 1800s, I mean, it showed up in orphanages where kids would die of infections. And the assumption was, we don't want to pass the infection around, so don't touch the kids. That's why they were dying. Nobody was loving them. So when you do massage a child, its brain develops faster, it gains weight faster than a child not touched, fed the same amount. So again, mechanically, these things have gone on for hundreds of years. Well, let me give you a quote from Maimonides, 900 years ago. And then from Cat Fancy magazine a couple of years ago. Maimonides said, if people took as good care of their animals, of themselves, as they do their animals, they would suffer fewer illnesses. And a few years ago in Cat Fancy magazine, because of what was happening to her cats, Doug and I now smoke in the yard. We're not killing our cats anymore. We hope you're not killing yours, because we love our cats more than the convenience of smoking indoors. Now, I wrote a letter to Cat Fancy magazine, which they didn't publish, because basically what they're saying is, you want to kill yourself, fine, but be good to your cats. I mean, you know, how can a woman say, I love my cats, while I'm killing myself? So this is not new, but I think as we become more involved in technology, you know, when you see families all sitting looking at things, you know, little gadgets they're holding in their hand, instead of talking to each other at the dinner table and anywhere else, even when they're out walking, people don't look you in the eye. I like saying hello to people, you know, but they're busy with earphones or looking or talking on the phone, and the detachment is sickening and dangerous. As I say, that's why Monday morning we have more illnesses. You know, it's what's going on in your life. And when your body knows you don't enjoy your life, it tries to get you out of here. You don't like living? Fine. You know, we'll leave. You'll be perfect again. Once you leave your body, yeah, it feels wonderful.
Well, that would be kind of different.
Yeah. I mean, I really feel that life is a school. I describe it in two ways. I mean, life is a labor pain, of self-birthing. So we use the pain to work out who we are. And that it's also a school, that we're here to move up in grades, to learn. So we improve the future by raising our level of consciousness. And, if we were all graduate students, this would be a nice world. I mean, think of what just went on, in Paris. I mean, how can you do this to people? I just talked about reverence for life. I'm picking up worms and they're walking in and killing human beings. I mean, what the hell is going on here? But it's how they were brought up. Their parents.
And they think that it's okay.
Yeah. Well, their parents, their God, it's revenge. This is from East of Eden, John Steinbeck. We all experience rejection. Now, let me say this before I give him the full quote. The opposite of love is indifference, rejection, and abuse. It's not hate and fear. And he said, we all experience rejection. With rejection comes a desire for revenge. With revenge, guilt. And there is the story of mankind. When I came across that sentence, it was, wow, thank you. Yeah, now I understand all the headlines. Yeah. I mean, those people didn't grow up with a house full of animals. They didn't carry insects out of the house rather than have their father swat, a fly or a bee who had gotten into the house. And our kids did. They would yell at me if I was going to kill an insect. And, I thought it was a little crazy, a little extreme, but yeah, you're safe with them. And think of, again, what went on here. I tell people, first, seek out life coaches, people who will be critical of you in a coaching way. In other words, to improve who you are and how you perform. Mm-hmm. And then you become a love warrior. And what that came from was something I was reading where it said, you could be a warrior, like these killing people, or you could be a love. And I said, yeah, you could be a love warrior. See, love is my weapon. What do I mean by that?
Oh, I just am going, ow, ow.
Yeah, but you walk into me with a gun, and what am I likely to say to you before you kill me? I love you. I love you. That's going to make it harder to pull the trigger than, hey, you son of a bitch, get the hell out of here. My God's better than your God. You don't know what the hell you're doing. Yeah, I love you. And it really upsets people when they're angry at you, because I love doing it. Well, again, a true story. We're up in Cape Cod, very heavy traffic, summertime. There's a teenager in the car behind me screaming obscenities, like it's my fault. We get to a corner, there's a cop. I said to the cop, who can hear him screaming all this, I said, will you tell him to be quiet? And the cop said, that's not my job. I couldn't believe he would say that. But since he did, I got out of the car with our kids saying, Daddy can have a gun, because they know I'm crazy. And I walked over to the kid, and I said to him, I want you to know something. I love you. I'm sorry that your parents do not. Now, as I walked away, I thought maybe that wasn't nice to add the second part. But I now think it was the best thing that ever happened to him. He made a U-turn and drove away. I know I told him the truth. My hope is, because I said it, he will go home and change his life and realize he is worth being loved, no matter what his parents treat him like. They're the problem, not him.
Bernie, we have 2 minutes before we need to wrap up.
Well, I know what to say.
Well, okay.
Yeah, because I talk so much, everybody interrupts me and says, Bernie, we're running out of time. And that's what I want everybody to remember. We're all going to run out of time someday. So enjoy your lifetime. And the best way is giving love. When you give, you also receive. It benefits the giver and the receiver. So be a love warrior and watch what happens.
Amen. I like that. A love warrior.
Yeah.
You know, it makes it sound like you could, well, it gives you permission to take control.
Yeah, I've had
and
people
do something.
Screaming at me for taking their parking space. And I lower my window and I say, I love you. Then they don't know what to do with you, you know? And I even had one person come up to me because there was this psychotic lady in a parking lot screaming at me. And I said to her, I don't know what's going on in your life, but I want you to know I love you. And she turned and walked away. And a guy came up to me and said, wow, thank you. I was going to level her. I didn't know what she was going to do to you. He was going to rescue me. And I said to her, I love you. And she couldn't deal with that, and off she went. So remember, it really works. Keep it up.
Perfect. And on that note, we are going to call it a show. Bernie, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom with the listeners.
Well, your introduction got me going.
Apparently.
Thank you.
His book is A Book of Miracles. His website is BernieSiegelMD.com. And we will be back after these words from our sponsors.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.
You're listening to IRN, the Inception Radio Network, Chicago, Illinois.
Are you looking for a cure for boredom? Never worry. IRN's new interactive website introduces a number of ways to pass time while you listen to your favorite show. Choose anything from the IRN chat lounge, the game lounge, video lounge, or the mood lounge. These fun, exciting features let you chat in real time with fellow listeners, view live skywatches, play daily posted online games, or pick a show based on topic. The choices are endless. Use your time wisely, keeping it all on IRN.
Who were the gods of antiquity? They've been described as the forces of nature, levels of consciousness, and aspects of our psyche. Stories that depict their incredible weapons, their flying machines, and their amazing adventures are characterized as being the product of our ancestors' fanciful imaginations. But what if the tales of the gods are true? Did the writers, chroniclers, and scribes of our distant past actually document a realistic view of our origin? My latest book, Man-Made, The Chronicles of Our Extraterrestrial Gods, looks at our most ancient legends. Learn of the torrid romances, elaborate plots, violent scandals, and conspiracies that played out in antiquity. Find out the role the gods played in the life and culture we have today. If you want to find out the truth of who we are and where we come from, order your copy of Man-Made today. For more information, go to www.manmadethechronicles.com. That's www.manmadethechronicles.com.
Hello, Inception Radio Network listeners. This is Amanda. Remember, you can take your Inception Radio shows on the go. Just download the Inception Radio Network app for your iPhone, iPad, or Android smartphones and access live shows, past shows, guest lineups, and much more. Just visit the iTunes Store or the Google Play Marketplace and download it today for free.
Move past the crossroads in your life and discover alternative solutions to your deepest concerns at soulhealer.com. So whether it's a physical problem, an emotional issue, a question about work, or troubles in your relationships, naturopath and medical intuitive Dr. Rita Louise can help you. Bring peace, harmony, and health back into your life. Schedule a session today. Visit soulhealer.com right away and live the life you've been dreaming of.
You didn't forget what's coming up tonight, did you? Hi, Inception Radio Network listeners. This is Amanda. Never miss that interview you were looking forward to or the show on your favorite topic. Follow IRN on Twitter, I_R_N, and get reminders about the evening's live shows as well as fun and important updates throughout the week. That's I_R_N, and never miss a great show again.
We only have a couple of seconds before we have to get back to the show, and I want to tell you how you can jumpstart your intuition today. Using my free 50-page introductory guide filled with simple, revolutionary, and proven techniques, you can ignite your intuition and tap into your inner wisdom, all from the comfort of your own home. The Institute of Applied Energetics is the leader in online home study instruction for those interested in becoming a certified medical intuitive, intuitive counselor, or energy medicine practitioner. Now is the time to transform your life and take it to a completely new level. Discover who you are and how you work. Open the door to the world of intuition, health, and healing. You can jumpstart your intuition right away by going to www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com and downloading our free guide. Get the opportunity of a lifetime and live the life you deserve. Download your free Jumpstart Your Intuition guide today at www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com and begin living a life filled with passion and purpose.
Computer? Is your internet connection down? Don't worry. Use your trusty cell phone or landline and call into our listen line at 401-283-6700 to listen to the Inception Radio Network 24/7. Again, that call-in number is 401-283-6700. For the Inception Radio Network, I am MJ.
Go deep inside yourself and venture into the realm of the unconscious mind with my Meditating on the Kabbalah guided imagery audio CDs. Discover who you are and what you want in life. Meditating on the Kabbalah can help you to open, clear, and revitalize the energetic pathways of your subtle being. They will support you in your spiritual quest by helping you to access the profound insights and inner guidance you need as you work in alignment with your highest good. Let them help you to release negative thoughts and emotions and clear away any limitations that may be keeping you from experiencing your full potential. Walk down the path to health, healing, understanding, and enlightenment with Meditating on the Kabbalah. Order your copy today at www.soulhealer.com. That's right, that's www.soulhealer.com.
Hello, Inception Radio Network. Would you like your favorite show to be played again live on air? Well, now the choice is in your hands with IRN's live request portal, an easy way to request your favorite show with a simple click. IRN's live request portal now gives you exclusive access to all the shows. How easy is it? Simply type a show name or a guest name, click request, even write a dedication message, and that's it. Try it now. Simply visit InceptionRadioNetwork.com, click on the live request tab under the show menu. Now playing your favorite show is just a mouse click away.
And now back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for staying tuned to the second hour of the show. Oh my God, we have Neale Donald Walsch coming on in this hour to talk to us about his new book, God's Message to the World. But Just Energy Radio is brought to you by the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com, where you can jumpstart your intuition today by downloading their free 50-page guide. It's also brought to you by soulhealer.com, where you can find out about all the products and services I offer, including medical intuition evaluations, energy healings, and psychic readings. So if there's things going on in your life, give me a call, send me an email, and we can set up a time for a private consultation in person, by phone, and even via Skype. So let me tell you a little bit about Neale and get him on the air because I think we have plenty to talk about. Neale Donald Walsch is a modern-day spiritual messenger whose words continue to touch the world in profound ways. With an early interest in religion and a deeply felt connection to spirituality, Neale spent the majority of his life thriving professionally yet searching for spiritual meaning before experiencing his now famous Conversations with God. The Conversations with God series of books that emerged from those encounters have been translated into 37 languages, touching millions and inspiring important changes in their day-to-day lives. His website is nealdonaldwalsh.com, so please welcome to Just Energy Radio, Neale Donald Walsch. Hi, Neale. How are you?
Well, I'm just wonderful. Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here.
You know, it's been so long since you've been on the show, and I'm just very thrilled to have you on. And this new book, I loved it. Loved it. So we're just going to jump right in. Because one of the things that I love is to have people step outside the box, to look at things from a new perspective. And that's exactly, to me, what this book does. But in reading it, you seemed a little down on what we're doing here on Earth, or at least our perception that the systems that we have put into place are leading to a higher quality of life for humanity. So why so down on kind of what we're doing here?
Because what we're doing here is not working in any area of our lives. The book is called, by the way, the title of the book is God's Message to the World, You've Got Me All Wrong. And the book makes the point at the outset that the problem in the world today is that none of the systems we have put into place to create a better life for all of us on this planet have, in fact, produced that. In fact, it's worse than that. Not only have they not produced the outcome for which they were designed, they've actually produced exactly the opposite. Let me give you some examples, if I might.
Sure, go ahead.
Our political system, which we created to produce safety and security for the world's people, have produced nothing but disagreement and disarray. Our economic systems, created to produce opportunity and sufficiency for all, have produced increasing poverty and massive economic inequality, with 85 of the world's richest people holding more wealth than 3.5 billion. Let me repeat that because you might have missed it. 85 people hold more wealth than 3.5 billion put together. Our ecological systems, created to help us produce a sustainable lifestyle, have been abused so much that they're now generating environmental disasters right and left. Our educational systems, which were created to lift higher and higher the knowledge base of the planet's population, have actually produced a drop in global awareness and sensitivity that each year sinks our intellectual common denominator lower and lower. We can't even remember our own telephone numbers anymore. Our healthcare systems, which were created in hopes of producing a good and long life for an increasingly higher percentage of people, are doing little to eliminate inequality of access to modern medicines and healthcare services, thus actually providing top-level medical services to a lower and lower percentage of people every year. Our social systems, which we created to produce the joy of community and harmony among a divergent population, more and more generate and encourage discordance, disparity, prejudice, and despair, to say nothing of rampant injustice. And we only need to mention two words to illustrate that: Eric Garner. And most sadly, most dysfunctional of all, our spiritual systems, created to produce a greater closeness to God and to each other, have actually produced bitter righteousness, shocking intolerance, widespread anger, deep-seated hatred, and self-justified violence. What gives here? What's going on with the human race? You ask me why I'm down on what's going on the planet. There's wonderful stuff happening, too, on the earth, but none of the systems we have put into place to create a better life has done anything near that. They've done, in fact, exactly the opposite. Nothing is working except for maybe 5% of the world's people. I'm sure you must be aware that roughly 5% of the world's people now hold or control 95% of the world's wealth and resources. that means unless we're okay, because, of course, those 5% are fine with that. They say, Neale, what's the problem? What's the problem? Just because 95% of the world's people do not control the wealth and resources of the planet? What's the trouble? Oh, wait a minute. I think I begin to understand. It turns out that 2.6 billion people, let me repeat that because you might have missed it, 2.6 billion people do not have a toilet on this planet today.
All right, I'd be kind of hurting with that one.
This in a civilization that calls itself civilized, where 1/3 of the population does not have sanitation, where 1.5 billion people do not have electricity. Did you know that 1.5 billion people, as we sit and talk today, in this year, 2014, do not have electricity? And
that's just hard to believe.
See, and then you asked me why I'm down. You asked me the question. That's why I laughed when you asked me the question, because clearly you don't understand. You don't understand that one out of 8 people in the world will go to bed tonight hungry. That's 1 out of every 8 people has insufficient food to eat.
Well, and I get it. And the reason why I asked the question is, your other books are very spiritually uplifting, and I started reading this book, and I'm like, boy, he's kind of pissed off. So I had to ask the question.
Yeah, I'm not pissed off. What I am is observing, and when you finish reading the book, excuse me, I'm sorry, the book is very uplifting, because the book talks about solutions, but the book also points to the problems, and the problem is our fundamental belief system about life. We can't, frankly, we just can't go on like this. If we're going to declare ourselves to be an evolved species, if we're going to declare ourselves to be a spiritual species, if we're going to declare ourselves to be a civilized civilization, then we're going to have to make some changes, it seems to me. We can't continue, living the way we're living and call it good. And by the way, that inures to our personal benefit. This is not just about changing the world or making conditions on the planet better. This is about our own individual lives, because it seems to me that it's very difficult. I would think it would be very difficult for any individual to reach and sustain a place of high individual consciousness, spiritual awareness, and spiritual peace when looking into the face of these conditions that are being experienced by 95% of the people on the planet. So it's not possible, I don't think, for us to feel, Neale, relax, everything is fine. I mean, I'm doing fine here in Terre Haute. Things are wonderful in Phoenix. There's no problem in Minneapolis. What? Neale, relax. And, of course, if you're okay with that, if you're okay with 1/3 of the population needing to relieve themselves outdoors, then fine. Live your life and allow yourself to imagine that all is well with the world. On the other hand, if you see that we're moving in the wrong direction on the planet, that we're moving into a place of non-sustainability, that we cannot sustain this lifestyle, then you might want to ask why. What is it that we don't understand? The understanding of which would change everything. And I believe that it is our spiritual understandings, not necessarily yours and mine specifically or individually, but those that are embraced by the largest number of people on the earth, that is, billions and billions of people who hold ideas about life and about God, specifically a whole raft of ideas about God, which drive the engine of the human experience and create these conditions I've just spoken of. That's why the book, God's Message to the World, You've Got Me All Wrong, has been written and published. Because when I asked God in my conversations with God, what is it? What is it that creates the extraordinarily dysfunctional world in which we live? God says it's really very simple. It's what you believe. It's what you believe about yourself about life, about the world, and mostly about God. Change those beliefs, and you will finally create the world for which you say you all yearn, but for which you do very little to create it.
It seems to me that in, I'm going to say, recent years, that people are starting to lift the veil of some of the dogma that we have been enculturated with. Not necessarily in the spiritual realms, but in other areas. I mean, in spiritual realms as well. But they're starting to ask more questions. They're starting to wanting to know who's the man standing behind the curtain. And it seems like bringing God into the picture in our relationship with each other is just another aspect of that questioning.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. And I also agree with your observation that we're seeing larger and larger numbers of people who are going there, who are beginning to finally explore and examine the root cause of our global dysfunction, to say nothing of in some cases, our individual dysfunction. What I notice is that even among the 5% of the people who are holding 95% of the world's wealth and resources, even among that 5%, many people are simply unhappy. Remarkably, they're simply unhappy. They're leading lives of discomfort and despair and unhappiness in way, way, way too many cases. So we even find suffering and unhappiness among the extraordinarily well-to-do and even among those who are living a very comfortable and wonderful life. So we have to ask ourselves, what's going on? And I think you're right. More and more people are asking themselves that question. The inquiry, however, the key question is, are we asking ourselves that question fast enough? That is, are enough people moving in that direction so that we can actually win this human race? Or are we going to be finding ourselves in such an unsustainable situation that in another 50 years, there's not enough water to serve us all on the planet? Or we've
but do you think we even have 50 years? That's the question I ask myself fairly regular.
That's a very good question. I don't have any way of really estimating whether it's 30 years, 50 years, or 100 years, but it's certainly not going to be an infinite number of years. I do believe that in the lives of my grandchildren, unless we turn something around here, things could become extremely difficult and very challenging on this wonderful planet. And the sad part about it is there's no reason for that. We have, in fact, been given a wonderful planet with abundant resources and sufficient opportunities for us to create the kind of life that we really want to experience. We simply have to stop being the way we're being now, stop acting the way we're acting now, and stop believing the things that we are believing now, which is what is causing us to act the way we're acting, you see.
And you believe that it all comes down to this dogma that we have been fed from a spiritual perspective?
I don't know that it all comes down from that, but it certainly does, to a large degree, come down to what we believe about life, and those ideas emerge from what we have been told about this person that is called God. And there are a lot of people on the planet who don't even believe in God, and they don't believe in God. They've moved away, if they ever did, from their belief in God, because they don't agree with what's being said about this God in whom many others do believe. So I'm not sure that that's the whole problem, but it's a huge, huge part of the problem. And because it is, and I can tell you why it is, by the way, most of the civil laws, I'm talking about civil laws on the earth, from country to country, are based to some degree in spiritual and religious beliefs. Most of the laws of Western countries, scholars about the law understand this perfectly, emerged from canon law. That is, in the earliest days when laws were being established, whether it's in England or later on in the United States and elsewhere, those laws were based largely on canon law. That is, the law of the Christian Catholic Church. And even to this day, in many countries, the law of the land is based on some scriptural or or spiritual religious passage like the Sharia, which of course is the basis of much of the civil laws of many of the countries where Islam is the predominant religion. So we don't have to look very far to see what is informing our civil laws. And those civil laws are directed toward the behaviors of individuals and corporations and politicians and the whole mechanistic structure of society from A to Z. Just to give you a simple example, there are actually laws in the United States and elsewhere in the world, by the way, that say it is criminal, it is against the law to marry a person of the same gender. Now, there is no reason in civil law for that to become an actual legal question. There's no civil reason, no reason in civil law. The only reason is that people believe that God says it's not okay. And so because billions of people, not a couple 100,000, but billions of people believe that it is against God's law to fall in love with and choose to spend your life with a person of the same gender, because it is presumably against God's law, we have made it against our law as well. That's just one of many, many examples. When I was a child in parochial school, they tied the hands of children, they tied the arms of children behind their backs with a towel if they were left-handed, because they said that left-handedness was a sign of the devil. I'm not making this up. This was in my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
In my childhood, a black man could not marry a white woman because interracial marriage was considered to be, follow my reasoning now, against the law of God. And because it was against the law of God, we decided we should make it against the law of human beings as well. The Mormon Church, until relatively recently, until about only 35 years ago, refused to allow a black man to become a priest in the Mormon Church because of the color of his skin. Because the Mormon Church believed, until a new revelation came to the leaders 30 years ago, the Mormon Church believed that persons with black skin carried, here we go again, the curse of Satan. This was a church saying this. Yeah, I could go on forever about how human beings have treated each other based on their understanding of how God is treating us. And then one day we woke up and said, you know what? What if God didn't have any of those preferences? What if God never even dreamt of, never even thought of an idea that because of the color of your skin, you shouldn't be a member of the clergy, to say nothing about your anatomical characteristics, because women still can't become members of the clergy in certain faiths because they don't have particular apertures. What in the world? What in the world have we done to ourselves, saying that this is God's preference and these are God's laws? So what we're calling for now is a brand new look at the possibility that it could be true. God's message to the world: you've got me all wrong. Guys, you're making it all up to suit your own personal predilections, having nothing to do with what God serves us with in terms of her desires, or what God gives us, or what God asks for or demands from us. So I've written a book that contains 17 statements that human beings believe are true about God, none of which are true. And on the back of the book, I actually printed those statements as a true or false quiz. True or false, God is to be feared. Well, 3.5 billion people in the world would say, of course, we should be God-fearing people. True or false, God demands obedience. Well, several billion people on the planet would say, of course God demands obedience. You don't obey God, you're in big trouble. True or false, God requires us to believe in God and to worship God in a specific way. That is, you must belong to a particular faith tradition or a particular religion. Otherwise, you're going straight to hell. True or false, God is vengeful and God's love can turn to wrath. And the list goes on. The book contains 17 such statements. Belief systems like God has a plan for us. Or God is on our side, and that allows us to lop off people's heads and broadcast it on television because God is on our side. Or God honors self-sacrifice and long-suffering and martyrdom. Or ideas like God sometimes answers our prayers and sometimes does not. God will reward us or punish us on Judgment Day. And the last two really, really powerful misbeliefs, misunderstandings. God wants us to return to heaven. And the biggest misunderstanding of all, God is separate from us. He's over there, and we're over here, and never the twain shall meet, except, of course, on Judgment Day, when those of us who have been naughty boys and girls will go straight to hell, a place of everlasting damnation, not even, equal to the sins we've committed, but everlasting damnation. And by the way, just in case you've missed a point, you're going to experience everlasting damnation, the fires and the torment of everlasting suffering in hell, even if you have been compassionate, kind, caring, loving, generous, peaceful, and patient as a person on earth. Doesn't matter. See, because you chose the wrong religion. So if you belong to the wrong faith, God says, I really don't care how you acted while you were alive. That doesn't matter to me. You didn't belong to the right religion, so you're going to suffer in the everlasting fires of hell. Unbelievable torment forever and ever and even forevermore. You were a nice person. Everyone who knew you said you were an incredibly wonderful human being. But see, we don't care about that up here. We only care that it's a name brand religion. You got to belong to the right religion or you're out.
Growing up, I went to Catholic school, and they told us that if you weren't baptized, that you went to limbo. So that created some big issues for me because my dad's Jewish. And so, I was like, can't you take it back? Can't you take the baptism back? Because it really upset me that when I died, I would never see my dad. I'd never see my grandmother. I would never see my grandfather again. And it started the schism within myself of separation from the Catholic Church in second grade. Just because of the stuff they say.
Fortunately, we're seeing some changes. Even the Catholic Church has announced that there's no such thing as limbo. The Pope said a couple of years ago, oh, you know what, we made a mistake. He made an official declaration and said, there is no such place as limbo, and the teaching of limbo was just simply an error. Granted, we made the error for several hundred years, but in fact, thinking about it more closely, we see that there's no such place as limbo. Pope John Paul II said something even more extraordinary in 1999. He in an encyclical before an audience of several hundred people in Rome, he said there's no such place as hell. Hell doesn't exist as a place of torment or eternal damnation. And furthermore, he said, it's not God's job to send us to hell. Hell is an experience, not a place, and it's the experience of separation that we voluntarily enter into. We separate ourselves from God, and there's nothing more hell-like, nothing more hellish than to be separated from God, but it's a voluntary choice that we make, and we can undo it. We can unchoose it. We can decide that we're going to actually, in fact, not separate ourselves from God. So this is the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church saying this.
I'm impressed. I'm really impressed.
So, and of course, as I mentioned a couple of years ago, relatively speaking, 30 years ago or so, in the 70s, the Mormon Church decided that it was okay for black men to become priests. It was worse than that, actually, in the Mormon Church. Not only could black men not become priests, black women, men or women, could not even attend temple. They were not, get this, not allowed into the house of the Lord. But about 30 years ago, the leadership of the church said, okay, fair enough, we made a mistake. And although they didn't say that, they said that they had received, in the words of the church leaders, a new revelation. They had received a new revelation. Those were the words that the leaders of the church used. And because of that new revelation, they rescinded their orders They rescinded their idea that they held from the beginning of the church, and they then allowed black people to come to temple and black men to become priests. Wow, what an enlightened point of view. It took them only until 1976 to get to that place. So you see how slow and how incredibly slow our progress has been. But it's now speeding up. We are increasing in our level of awareness, and we're saying to each other, okay, obviously, some of these beliefs are, may I use the word, ridiculous. And so we are now going to decide, what if it were true that many of the things we believe about God is to be feared. God's forgiveness is required for us to get into heaven. God was at war with the devil, and that's how this all began.
Well, and let me interject something here. I mean, your focus has been on more contemporary religions and the belief systems, but much of the stuff that you cover, which is the part that I was like, sweet about this book, are belief systems that go back so far into antiquity, long before the Jews, long before the Catholics, that really kind of create the foundation of our civilization. And the question I always ask myself when I start stepping outside that box, that little heretical box, is, well, who made up these rules in the first place? Whose guidelines are we following? Because if they're not God's, they're somebody's. And this is, some of them are universal. They are found in every culture on the planet.
I think that the challenge that we are facing is that we are a very young species, number one. Let me comment on that at two levels. First of all, the age of our species itself. It's not widely understood. It's not widely known or comprehended deeply that we are a very, very young species in this universe. First of all, of course, there are many more species of sentient beings in this universe than human beings. We know that. I mean, any thinking person understands that. There are billions and billions of stars around which revolve trillions of planets. Surely there's at least one other one, and of course there are many more, where life forms have been able to exist, and those life forms have created actual civilizations, that is, civilizations that are civilized as opposed to our uncivilized civilization. Our civilization is so uncivil that we actually kill people by the government. The governments in countries kill people in order to tell people that it's wrong to kill people. We call that the death penalty. And so in states like Texas, they actually brag about the fact that last year they put to death over 550 people, put to death by the state to teach us that killing people is not okay. Completely ignoring Einstein's marvelous insight that you cannot solve any problem using the same energy that created it. You're not going to end violence with violence. You're not going to end anger with anger. And so, but we're a very young species. So here's how young we are, just so people can understand the nature of the problem. If you take the age of the Earth and put it on the scale of 1 year, just for purposes of scale, so we can really bring it within our ability to understand. Let's pretend that the entire age of the Earth has been overlaid on a calendar year. If that's true, the first single-cell forms of life on the Earth didn't appear until the end of March. Dinosaurs didn't appear on this planet until December the 7th. Humanoids, that is, mammals who walked upright on two legs, did not appear until around the 24th or 25th of December. And the entirety of human history, that is, everything we've recorded in human history, has taken place in the last 60 seconds of the year. That's how young we are as a species relative to the age of just this planet. Forget about the age of the universe. So we can see then that we are a very, very primitive, immature species in the very earliest stages of our birth into the cosmic community of sentient beings. So that's condition number one I wanted to discuss in terms of where did all these ideas come from. These are the ideas of children who simply don't understand, who simply really believe in a deity. We'll give them credit for that. At least they do believe there is a deity. At least they do believe there's something larger than us. Fair enough. But a very immature belief that says, it's the God of the brand name. You either belong to this religion or you're going to hell for the rest of all eternity, because I only accept people who have the right membership card. And that is, of course, an extraordinarily immature, primitive thought of a child. Now, where do these thoughts come from? Where did the original thought come from? And what is the original, if there was an original mistake, what was the original mistake? The original mistake came in the earliest days of our awakening as a species of sentient beings. When we first began to put two and two together, even at the most primitive level, and began to come to understand some things about life. Picture the caveman looking into a pool of water, and he sees his reflection. And at some point in time, it occurred to him that the person in the water was doing the same thing he was doing. He'd scratch his head, the person in the water would scratch his head. He'd tug on his ear, the person in the water would tug on his ear. And he finally got, oh my gosh, that's me. And so the concept of self-awareness came upon us as a species of sentient beings. We saw ourselves and we began to recognize ourselves as different from and other than everybody else. Now we're all seated around the campfire here in the caveman days. We're all seated around the campfire, and we're eating whatever we managed to capture that day, and we're having a fairly good time. And suddenly, the rains come. Suddenly, thunder and lightning, and there's a crack of thunder that cracks the air, and we're all wondering where that came from. So the head of the clan, who was always the biggest, brutest, strongest one, the most angry one, and we all had to kowtow to him and give him whatever he wanted. As long as we could give him what he wanted and what pleasured him, he would be reasonably okay with life. But if you got him upset, he'd be very, very angry and start punishing people, actually killing people. So we had to take very good care of the biggest, strongest guy, in the clan. He turned around and said, "Who did that? I demand to know." He just in his own grunting way. And nobody around the campfire would admit that they caused the thunder and the lightning. And then so that he sent his scouts out to other clans around, and finally they realized, none of us have created that incredibly scary experience, that crack of thunder and that lightning that started the forest fire. None of us did that. And that's when the idea of something else dawned upon the just emerging human mind. There must be something else. If none of us did that, then there's something else that's more powerful than we are. And so the nature gods, the so-called nature gods, what became the nature gods, the idea of that was developed in the primitive mind of man. God of the harvest, God of the rain, God of this and God of that, and the evil spirits as well that caused the thunder and the lightning and the forest fires and the earthquakes and all the other activities of nature that were not so welcome. And so we began to think of us down here and something else over there. And so we began to have this idea that if we could just appease, if we could just treat this other thing that was clearly more powerful than us, we had no control over it, but if we could appease it, even as we appease the head of our clan, by treating him with whatever pleasured him, if we could figure out what pleasures this other huge, huge thing that's out there, then maybe we can get it to do what we want it to do, or at least not do so much of what we don't want it to do. And then along came a drought. And it was a long drought, many, many months, and the food was drying up, and the clan was in desperate trouble. And they didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to get this other thing that was so much larger than it to bring the rains, somehow to do something, make it happy. What do we have to do to make this thing happy? So they threw a little campfire party, a little campfire celebration, as they used to do for the head of the clan. They treated him the same way. So how do we treat this brute in the sky? And what do we make it? So this, one person got up and did a little dance, and he reached over to one of the branches of the tree, which was dying for lack of water, and of course it was dry, and so he snapped off a branch and he started shaking it just to do a little dance with it, and it made a little noise because the leaves were all very dry, so he made a little rattling sound. He did the dance, and as luck would have it, as it would happen, the rains came in that moment, and everyone turned to the rainmaker, which is what he soon became called. He became the second most powerful person in the clan. the head of the clan and then the rainmaker. He became the chief priest, if you will, of the clan. And whenever they wanted rain, more rain to come, they asked him to do his little rain dance. And metaphysics being what it is, if you believe that something will occur, it will occur, whether you're primitive or not, because metaphysics is metaphysics. So, as it turned out, 3 times out of 4 when he did his dance, darn if it didn't rain. Thus was born religion. Do this, and you get that. Be good little boys and girls, and you'll get rewarded. But it was a religion based on separation. It was a separation theology that said God is over here, and we're over there, and never the twain shall meet. And that wouldn't be so bad if the separation theology began and ended there, my dear, but it doesn't. A separation theology creates a separation cosmology. That is a cosmological way of looking at life, whether you believe in God or not, that says that everything is separate from everything else. And a separation cosmology creates a separation psychology. Individual psychological profiles that allow us to feel totally alone and lonely in a crowd, in a planet that's overcrowded, and yet we feel still totally alone. And a separation psychology produces a separation sociology. That is, entire societies that imagine that they're separate from each other, and by the way, better than each other. And a separation sociology produces a separation pathology, pathological behaviors of self-destruction, evident from the beginning of human history. So we see then that a separation theology creates a separation cosmology, which creates a separation psychology, which creates a separation sociology, which creates a separation pathology. Oh my goodness. We have a problem. Houston, we have a problem, because we think that we're separate from each other, and we think that we're separate from God. And we are neither. And so the belief in separation is where it all began. I'm sorry to give you a 14-minute answer to your 1-minute question, but it was not a small question.
I like big questions. When, you bring up the point about people that contend that God doesn't exist, then there's the whole group that believe that God is some, and I try to find a politically correct way of saying this, and so this is my more politically correct way, an older gentleman with a white beard. When you think of God and our relationship with God and our experience here on earth, what is your vision of God?
It's not my vision of God. It's not my vision of God. It's God's revelation to humanity. Okay. And God has made it very clear in revelation after revelation, through century after century, and in more recent times, in contemporary revelations as well. By the way, God does reveal itself even in contemporary times. God hasn't stopped talking to humanity, as we observe in the change of heart of, like, for instance, the Pope, who said, what he said about limbo doesn't exist. A revelation. Like the leaders of the Mormon Church, it's okay for black men to become priests. A revelation. So revelations occur in human history right up to the present time. So the answer to your question is not what I think that God is or what I think our relationship is to God, but what God has revealed to us through us, and that is this. God obviously is not an older gentleman with a white beard and a long white robe sitting someplace on a throne in the sky, nor does God have any gender in particular, one gender or the other. God is the essential essence, the prime force, the ultimate source of wisdom and intelligence, awareness and consciousness. God is an energy, if you please, that can take any form it wishes to take and will take any form that it seeks to take as a means of revealing itself to its own creations. So God will appear in one form or another, in whatever form it feels that the creations that it has produced can understand at that point, at that level in their evolutionary progress. But God is essentially a foundational energy. If I could put it this way, the stem cell of the universe. We've discovered just in the recent times a thing called a stem cell. And we noticed then that all the cells of the body emerged at one point in time from a single stem cell, and the stem cell is the undifferentiated cellular structure of the human body. And now they've taken stem cells and they can coax those cells in a laboratory to regenerate themselves in the form of brain cells, heart cells, lung cells, or the cells of any tissue in the body. This is called biomedicine now. In the next 35 or 40 years, talk about the future, we're going to be able to actually recreate these stem cells and inject them into the heart or the lung or any area of the body that has been diseased, and give it healthy new cells and regenerate themselves to the point where our lifespans will increase by many, 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 many years. In fact, sooner or later, if we don't kill ourselves in other ways, if we don't just completely destroy the planet, the human species will have the option of dying when it chooses to, and not when it feels it has to because of dis-ease. But that's another whole topic. So but imagine that God would be, to use our imagination, the stem cell of the universe. That is the undifferentiated expression, the undifferentiated singular energy of life that then differentiates itself quite consciously and with full awareness to become everything we see in physicality. Every planet, every sun, every person, every being, every expression of divinity through physicality. So then we see that what is God is better answered by asking the question, what is God not? And the answer to that question is nothing. There is nothing that God is not. Or to put it now in the reverse, God is all there is, all there ever was, all there is now, and all there ever will be. Or, as the Catholic Church has it, and by the way, churches are not totally and completely wrong. I'm not standing here saying for 1 minute that organized religions don't have anything right. They do, in fact, have a great deal of it right. They simply are incomplete. But I love the Catholic Church's statement on this particular aspect of who and what God is. The essential energy, the prime force, the stem cell of the universe, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
Now, don't forget the amen. You're talking about people receiving revelations from God, which I do believe firmly. But it seems like, you were talking about like Sharia law, which it was divinely given. And we look at some of these other cultures, especially ones we're having conflict with. It seems like the revelations that they're receiving are not congruent with the ones that we have or we're receiving. Or do you see where I'm going with that?
Yeah, like the 300 years of the Christian, spell that Christian, Christian crusades. 300 years, directed by the Pope, who sent the Crusaders out and said, you will tell people they have the option of either confessing in Christ or being killed on the spot. Read that, on the spot. And this went on for 300 years, creating an understandable tradition of hatred, angst, and anxiety among other peoples of the earth, not the least of whom belong to the Islamic religion, who say that, you know what, you started it. However, even they didn't start it. So it's not a question of who's at fault. I just want to be real clear here. This is not about just people who believe in one particular way, and we're going to suddenly make those guys the bad guys. There are enough people of other faiths as well who've committed the exact same, I'm going to use the word offense, against humanity. And it's going on today. It's going on even today. So, yes, there are belief systems, both Christian and Islamic and others, for that matter, that violate what we understand to be our intuitive sense, our deep-seated cellular understanding of who we really are. I'm not even going to say of what's right and wrong, because right and wrong are a movable feast, but of who we really are and what it really means to be and to express and to experience divinity flowing in us, through us, and as us. And clearly it can't be divine to kill people because they disagree with us, or to use violence as a means of advancing a particular spiritual concept or philosophy. So, yes, there is a divergence because of our youth, because we simply don't understand fundamental basics of what is really true in the universe. We still believe in a separation theology. We still believe in a God who is vengeful and wrathful and violent. And we allow our idea of a punishing, violent, a condemning God, we allow our ideas of that kind of God to form and to give us the moral authority for us to form our concepts of right and wrong and our behaviors. Getting back to the wonderful state of Texas, where they kill 550 people a year in the death penalty, and when you say, well, how can a civilized society do that? I mean, how can a group of sentient beings who imagine themselves to be civilized kill people deliberately as a means of saying that killing people deliberately isn't okay? And they answer, well, the scriptures have it, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. It's simple justice.
You just obviously haven't really spent much time in Texas. I live in Texas, so just making a comment. Anyway, move along. Actually, we have about 10 minutes left, and I want to give you an opportunity to kind of bring this full circle with the little bit of time we have left.
Sure. I just wanted to, the last comment I was going to make is our ideas of justice are based on what we imagine God's ideas of justice to be. That's the point I was making. And as long as we imagine that God lives within a system of justice where things are right and things are wrong, and if you do the wrong thing, you're punished. And we imagine that God has a need, somehow ego need to do that, or some other need to do that, that God has somehow a need to send you to hell because you simply confessed in the wrong religion. As long as we hold that belief, we're going to use that idea of a punishing, violent, vindictive, angry God as our moral authority for us to be violent, punishing, vindictive, and angry as well. So we remove the first belief, and the second behaviors begin to dissolve.
Well, and that leads us into this question. What do you think the world would be like if we let go of this long-term negative programming that we have found ourselves stuck in?
We would have the 1,000 years of peace and more that has long been predicted for the human race. What would happen is, obviously, first of all, violence would disappear from the face of the earth. We could no longer be violent with each other because we have now embraced a notion that we are all one. That what I do for you, I do for me. This goes way past, by the way, you are your brother's keeper. This is not a fancy version of you're your brother's keeper. I am not my brother's keeper. I am my brother. That is, there's no difference except in differentiation between him and me, any more than my fingers are not part of my own body. See, I got 5 fingers as I look at my hand, and each finger looks different and performs a different function, but it is still attached to and part of the hand, which is attached to and part of my body. In that way are we connected to each other as well, appearing to be different and functioning, in fact, in different ways, but no less part of the singular body of life itself that we call, in my vernacular, God. If we begin to embrace that notion, all of the behaviors that we would never, ever perform, never, ever behave that way with people, with ourselves, we would in fact treat ourselves differently as well. We would treat ourselves far better than we do now, and we would treat others as we treat ourselves. What's interesting is that the teachers of all the world's great religions, doesn't matter which one you choose, they've all articulated in one way or another the same bottom line truth. The answer out of this maze, the way to get out of this incredible dilemma, is really quite simple. You can put it in one sentence, actually. Do unto others as you would have it done unto you. Because what you do unto others is being done unto you, in case we haven't noticed. And the reason that what you do unto others is being done unto you is because there's only one of us. We are a single being demonstrating and expressing as individuations of the self-same single being. So what would happen if the earth chose finally to let go of its idea of separation and to notice that we all are fingers on the same hand, and we all are hands of the same being called God, what would happen is all of the laws, the customs, and the behaviors that could only emerge from a society that imagines itself to be separate from each other would disappear virtually overnight. We would never treat another person unfairly, to say nothing of cruelly, to say nothing of violently. We would find a way to make sure that we all understood that there's enough. We would never allow 653 children to die on this planet every hour. I said every hour of starvation, while we throw away more food in the restaurants of New York City on any given night than it would take to feed them for a week.
Oh, don't even get me started on that. I can't believe that there are places that will throw the food away and not give it to a shelter or let people have it. And I find it appalling.
See, because there are health laws, my dear, and if somebody got sick off of eating someone else's leftovers, they would then be able to sue the restaurant. So we have to protect the owners of the restaurant and make sure that nobody loses any money in a lawsuit like that. I know. I was homeless. I was homeless for a year. I walked the streets for a year. I understand what it's like to be on the sidewalk for a year of your life, looking for your next meal, trying to figure out where it could come from. And we had, thank goodness, we had a kitchen worker at one of the local restaurants where I lived who understood exactly what you're saying, and he would sneak the food out, the leftover food that people didn't eat. He would just sneak it out to the back door to the homeless, and I was one of them, and feed us and say, not a word, guys, not a word. And if you do get a stomach ache or you do happen to become ill over this, for heaven's sake, just not a word. Don't tell anybody I'm doing this. But we all lined up from 10 o'clock till 11 o'clock at night behind that guy's restaurant, and out he came with the dishes of the stuff. Because, you know, when we understand that we are all one, we would never allow 650 children to die every single 60 minutes on this planet for insufficient food, to talk about just one of the many conditions that would no longer exist on the planet. We would, in fact, create the paradise of which we are capable once we understand fully who we are. That's why I invite people to read the book, God's Message to the World, You've Got Me All Wrong. And by the way, you can read 5 chapters of it for free. I've got it on the internet, a 5-chapter sample of the book. You can get it at godsmessagetotheworld.info.
godsmessagetotheworld.info. I think people don't understand, like in a marriage or in a family, everyone that works, you know, that works in the dynamics, that everyone chips in and does things to benefit the relationship or benefit the family so that they all can grow, versus, well, this is your thing and this is my thing, and keeping it all separate. And those are the families that fall apart.
If we understood that the whole human family was one family, even as we understand that in our own lives, most of us do, everything would change overnight. Mm-hmm. If you're having a big holiday meal and Uncle Jim shows up at the front door, he's been gone to New Zealand for 10 years on his own adventure. He came back and realized, oh, this is the day that they have their annual feast. And he comes to the front door, Uncle Jim, we haven't seen you in 5 years. How have you been? I'm wonderful. May I come in to eat? No, sorry. You got to stay out there. Maybe we'll throw some scraps at you. Of course not. We let him in immediately because he's long lost Uncle Jim. Of course. And nobody says, we didn't prepare enough. We simply share enough in a way that allows Uncle Jim to sit down with us. There's always enough. Always enough. We simply each find a way to share. Now, when we decide that the entire world is Uncle Jim, that there's nobody who's not Uncle Jim, that we all belong to the same family, then we show up at the same table and we say, you know what? There's enough.
Always. And on that note, Neale, we need to call it an episode. Thank you so much. I loved it. Loved it, loved it, loved it.
Thank you. It's been wonderful to be here with you. Thanks for asking.
Oh, thanks for coming on. So it's Neale Donald Walsch. His book is Messages... God's Message to the World.
Got me all wrong.
Got me all wrong. And next week, we will be talking with Susan Shumsky about the power of the chakras. And so until next week, I'm Dr. Rita Louise. This is Just Energy Radio. Be blessed.
Join host Dr. Rita Louise each week at this time for Just Energy Radio. Point your browser to www.justenergyradio.com for more show information and to contact Dr. Rita. Until next time, remember, it's all just energy.